Should you be excited if you've pre-ordered one of these saws? Has the ugly law of diminishing returns shown its face in the Husqvarna 564 XP? Since this saw has launched, there's been quite a few people operating them on YouTube in day-to-day logging and land clearing type tasks. When the opportunity came for this saw to arrive here, it was perfect because I have a large land clearing project for ourselves. We're building a 60 by 40 shop. All of it was getting dozed and I needed to cut up all of the trees. I had almost every saw ready to go with sharp chains on it, and my plan was to swap saws rather than to swap chains or sharpen chains to keep my dozer operator from waiting on me. That being said, I got notified late on Thursday that this 564 XP was headed my way next day air, and I had limited time to use it. It was the perfect opportunity. I don't get to watch YouTube as much as I once did, but I think that I'm going to be one of the earliest people to put a significant amount of time on the 564 in a real work scenario. And when I say significant, what that means is somewhere around 4 to 5 tanks. Now, that's obviously not a long-term review, but I got a real good feeling to talk about what we're going to talk about today. I have not even popped the top cover off this thing. I don't have a clue if the filter was clean or dirty when I got it, because when it arrived, my dozer was already working on pushing dirt on my driveway, digging stumps out, and we were ready to get started doing trees. We'll go over a quick few specs, but this will not be extensive because there's other channels that have covered all of the details extensively, like weighing it without bar and chain oil. I'm not going to take the time to do that. I printed out a comparison from Husqvarna's website on the 564, the 562 Mark II, and the 572. You can see the prices currently here in 2026. Guys, all we know is that prices are likely to continue changing. I don't know if they're ever going to go down again. So just a quick overview. You can pause the screen if you'd like to see those, but really the big deal is here is 5.4 horsepower, 4.7 and 5.8. I then want to jump to the weight. Okay, let's see if I can find it here. 564, 562 Mark II, and 572. Feel free to pause this and take a look at it if you'd like, but these are the specs real quickly on these three saws. I can tell you that I did not do that. We used Echo Red Armor at 40-1 with non-ethanol mid-grade fuel. So you can debate down in the comment section of whether or not the things I experienced was fuel related or just normal operation. In this video, there's going to be 7 sections ranging from how the saw feels, the starting procedure, taking a look at it for the first time because I actually, like I said, haven't even taken off the top cover, so I'm really curious to see. I've seen it in videos, but again, my focus was getting time on this saw. I did notice some things while I was operating it that impressed me. The first thing I want to talk about is how the saw felt with a 24-inch light bar cutting in hardwood and softwood. When I say a light bar, I was using the VersaCut bar. Guys, I get those from sawsuppliers.com. You can get great deals. There will be links down below. When you buy in bulk, different quantities of bars, multiple chains, and so forth, they offer great discounts. Make sure you check those out. The balance and the feel were great with the 24-inch VersaCut bar on there. Even though this saw can handle a longer bar, I really think that 24 inches of light bar is really the best place because of balance. And I'll explain myself. In my opinion, it's worth having a little extra weight on the power head of the saw if you're going to run a longer bar. If you have a 32-inch bar and you have a super lightweight power head and you have plenty of power to run it, it still feels really weird, especially when there's not a lot of weight to basically create a nice balance or pivot point off of the front handle. So I found that out with running a massively powerful 50cc saw, that little Echo up there from 307 Performance. I thought, like, man, this would be really cool to be able to run a 24-inch bar on, but in reality, The saw could easily do it, but it doesn't feel right. I actually almost want to shrink the bar down to 18-inch light bar because the power head is so darn light. And this is going to be fairly subjective, but previously I feel as if the 572 XP that I ran at Mike's house at the Rusty Garage in Homestead was the smoothest saw I had ever run, and that includes running saws like a 372 X Torque, 395, which are really, really nice. I have a 500i right to my side here. It's really nice, but the 572 was extremely smooth. I think that this 564 XP is even smoother, and that is mind-blowing. Now let's talk about cold start and hot start procedure, and I want to preface this. I didn't look at the manual. I don't recall what Husqvarna says that you ought to be doing. I'll contrast that to like a 592 XP that I ran this year at the Bunyan show with Santa Saw's Rick. Really cool guy, but he kind of gave me some education on the starting procedure on the 592 XP with Auto Tune 3.0. That is a carbureted saw with electronically adjusted tuners. That saw, hot or cold, is recommended that you purge it, choke it, fast idle it, and something like that. So anyway, this saw is nothing like that. I was a little bit concerned because this saw came up north, and all I know is that it's been pretty cold here, and it's even been colder up there. And I don't know when the last time this saw was run. This saw was in hardworking man's hands with Heath and Rachel. It looked really cold there when they had it. So needless to say, I was wondering what the procedure would be like if this thing was going to give me trouble. Literally, I'm telling you, UPS arrived while my dozer was working, and he was actually waiting on me to get this saw because he wanted to be able to start pushing trees, but I didn't want to push trees until it arrived. UPS delivered it. I put it on the back of the tailgate, was super excited and super stoked, put fuel in it, put a bar and chain on it, started it, and I was shocked. First start.
Oh man, 2 pulls.
One pull, 2 pulls, it was on. No choke procedure. It ran good. It idled good. I couldn't be happier. That was really good. Now let's talk about operation when I was out there working over an entire day. This saw sat in the tractor in the sheath, and I hopped on and off the tractor as he pushed a few trees at a time. I'd go buck logs off of it, cut up the tops real quickly, use my tractor to get the logs out to keep them as clean as possible. So again, this saw was starting and stopping all day long. Generally speaking, I didn't press the purge bulb in between each session. I started doing that if the saw had sat for quite a while, and by quite a while I might talk about like maybe 45 minutes to an hour. I don't really know because I was losing track of time. We were just working. What I generally experienced was most of the time, first pull starts, no problem at all. If it didn't start the first time, second pull generally took care of it. But one thing that I noticed is that once you started it, you kind of had to blip the throttle pretty quickly because it didn't seem to want to like idle up to keep itself running. So it kind of acted like my 500i when sometimes I pull it over and it starts and then it just kind of dies out. This saw sort of did that as well. Another thing that I noticed that, I do this all the time. I've had people comment about it, but I put my chain brake on pretty much as soon as I stop cutting. It's just a habit that I have. If you pull it over, start it, and you blip the throttle with the chain brake, what I experienced is actually the saw would actually almost die. It was like almost like it couldn't get the right idle or something. So I real quickly had to remove the chain brake, blip it, and then it was good to go. Remember, these are electronic saws, and the saws are not available yet for sale in terms of getting delivery. Husqvarna no doubt is going to be refining the software. They've issued updates on other 5 Series saws. This is early still, guys. There's not a lot of these out there in the wild in the public hands, but I just want to share what I experienced. That kind of comes into the question of, did my fuel, the 40-to-1, potentially impact that? It's a possibility, but guys, I am not mixing separate fuels for all my saws. There's guys that run like different fuel and different saws. That's not happening. I'm not doing that. Now let's talk about the power characteristics. If I recall correctly, Husqvarna positions this saw as a 60cc saw in like a 50cc body and power close to or equal to a 70cc saw. I'm struggling, guys. I got sick actually before we started yesterday. That was some of the most cutting. Honestly, I used to clear land with an excavation company quite often. I ran the saw. I've cut a lot of tanks in a row, and I really think that this was some of the most time I've ever had in one go round. You know, because cutting firewood, generally I don't go for 10, 12 hours in a day, but that's what happened yesterday. It was longer than that. It was pretty intense. This saw had a very nice power band. No matter how I was cutting, whether just letting the chain cut the wood or dogging in a little bit, the saw was very, very nice to use. I have a very popular video on my Steel 500i where I sort of described the saw as having a second gear. And what I was talking about is when you put the saw in wood and leaned on it, the electronics seemed to me like they put extra fuel and air into the carburetor, or not the carburetor, the fuel system, the intake, whatever you want to say, because they're fuel injected just like this 564 XP. It seems like they are able to dump more fuel, get that saw a little bit stronger in the cut, and that happens on the 500i, but I feel as if for a 62cc saw like this 564, I feel like it's like that, but on steroids. And keep in mind, towards the end of this video, we will be talking about what this saw is and what it isn't. So I'll clarify just how I feel about it in terms of competing with a 70cc saw. This saw was a pleasure to run in small limbwood, whether it be oak or pine. And it was also great in pine and in hardwood. Guys, we were pretty much cutting pine and oak. That's it. I don't think I cut another speed. There was a couple little small dogwoods actually, but they're tiny, like this big max. Anyway, oak and pine. What's cool about that is, like my 500i, I feel like that saw really needs to be loaded up in order to be fun to run. And so I think that some people like to run their chains hungrier and all that. This saw was nice to use whether you're cutting little bits of wood like that or up to 24-inch oak. That's about all we were able to get off of my property in this project. And I also want to state that I used 2 chains on this saw while I was cutting. I take quite a bit of precaution to keep my chain sharp because I was trying to be considerate of the dozer operator's time, because Bucky from the Long Way YouTube channel, make sure you check out those clearing videos. Those should hopefully have posted before this video does. You know, he was out here helping me out. I didn't want to waste time messing around. Guys, you're going to see in that video that sometimes I made like extra long bucks off of the stump. I could have gotten maybe an extra 2 feet, but I left it on the stump, but that was because there was a ton of dirt piled up on top. I don't have time to sit there and chop it off with an axe, try to brush it off, blow it off, or whatever. I'm not production logging for money here. We were just trying to clear land, and I wanted to keep all of my trees from going into a massive burn pile. So I was able to get firewood logs out and potentially some sawmill logs. With that being said, I started off with full chisel. I fully anticipated that chain was going to get hurt pretty quickly. It lasted probably about 2 tanks of fuel, in a tank and a half maybe. It started getting dull. I ran it a hair, but listen, I didn't have to push the saw through it, but I could tell it had dulled a little bit. Had a little bit of pine I was cutting. It was fine. I then, on next refuel, went ahead and put a semi-chisel chain on it. That's what I cut with the remainder amount of time, because semi-chisel is best in dirty situations like I was in. And because I'm short on time, I'm not going to do my classic comparisons. People love those. I had all kinds of ideas, but this is not my saw. I got to ship it back tomorrow, guys, and I feel like crud. And I've also got a ton of editing to do because I need to get this stuff as soon as possible online for y'all to see. I ran only my 562 side by side with this out on the job, and the reason why that saw was out was because I did more than once pinch myself, given the fact that all these were dozed over trees. Keep in mind, you know, a dozer picks that stump up out of the ground, pushes it a little bit, there gets to be weird tensions all over the place. I got caught by it, and guys, listen, I get pinched probably more than you do. The 562 XP Mark 1, that's what I own. Unfortunately, I don't have a Mark 2 to compare it with. I've only run a Mark 2 briefly again at the Bunyan show this year with Rick. I could tell that the 562 XP simply doesn't have the pull of the 564. It had a skip chain with a 24-inch light bar. It's what's up on the wall right here. Man, it's really hard to tell all these saws apart. These things are so close in size to me. And this one too, like I had to look at the side cover consistently throughout the day because I did have my 550 on standby too, just in case, but I just never needed it. Again, the 562 had skip chain on it, and I have some tests. You guys are going to disagree with me, but from my experience in the size logs that I tested, pine and oak, there really wasn't that much of a difference between skip and full comp, full chisel chain. The slowest certainly was the semi-chisel, and then the next slowest was when I lowered my rakers pretty heavily on a hand-filed chain with the full comp, full chisel chain. It was faster in one small circumstance, and then every other time wasn't beneficial. And that was all Oregon chain. And speaking about chains and setting rakers, behind me there's this Husqvarna 2-in-1 gauge. Guys, I'm not a really big proponent of the steel 2-in-1. They work totally fine, but to me, the rakers are way too low, making the chain way hungry. I was lucky enough to get my hands on one of those. I will be having videos on it, and I wanted to use it, but the only problem is they recommend C83 and C85, and I didn't want to like try to test that on other chains, because if the results didn't come out very well, I didn't want to have the variable or the question mark hanging over, well, you didn't use it on the chain it was designed for. So I went ahead and picked up 3 C83 chains so that way I can use those. I always need 24-inch chain, so that's going to be a future video. This is going to be short, but let's talk about the build quality. Everything that I noticed initially, the saw is the most beautiful chainsaw I have ever seen. And I'm talking about just some features on there, the fit and finish. Guys, I haven't taken the cover off, but everything just feels super high quality. What I did experience was the clutch cover. They have made some changes in those bar nuts, I believe. Watch, I'll probably be wrong and the internet will be making fun of me, but I feel like there's a design change there. The bar nuts are different. It was just really nice. That leads me into, let's take a look at the saw together a little bit more closely. And this is, like I said, somewhere between 4 and 5 tanks of fuel. I apologize. I didn't film every time I refueled, so I kind of lost count, but I think I distinctly remember about that many circumstances. As promised, we'll take a first look. I promise you, I was really tempted to pull this cover off, but I haven't even looked at it. It's going to be really shocking if I pull that off and find there was no air cleaner on it the entire time. I think Husqvarna has the best way of removing the top cover on saws. I just like these clips. I don't want to sit there and unscrew something. That's just my personal opinion. All right, you ready for the first reveal? Let's take a look at how much this has in it. I've said that this is the best air cleaner on any saw. I really mean it, guys. I really think that you could probably cut with like 10, 15 tanks and not worry about getting to the air cleaner on that one. I could be wrong, but that's just my perception. Let's take a look. And again, I don't actually know what this looked like before I got it, but this is what we've got. Okay. So we do have some dust, as to be expected. That air cleaner doesn't look super bad to me. It does have some. It's only dust, not large chips. I see 0 large chips in here. Now, I'm going to say this. I'm really curious to see how this looks like in here. I've made videos saying that I don't think that this is the best filtration and this is the best filtration. I don't know why, but it seems like some fine material gets into there. I just really don't know why. I think that like this air filter and this air filter works better. Now, I don't have a lot of time on the actual OEM 372. This saw is still yet to be seen operational on the channel. I've shown it start, but we have not cut with it yet. Make sure you stay tuned and follow us if you do want to see this saw run. But guys, we are not just about chainsaws, but we are very chainsaw heavy, as you can tell. With that being said, let's get back under here. I don't know what we're going to see, guys. I like this. This is a larger filter than the 562, guys. I'm not going to compare them. Okay. Let's see. I don't know yet. I'm gonna use the zoom here, see if we can see better. That's not good. Okay. Guys, I see a lot of shimmering and shining here, you know, because it is a two-stroke engine. I can't tell. It looks like on the camera you might see something there on the bronze part. I'll stick a little screwdriver in there and see if we can tell if that's dust. It does look like a little bit of fine dust, honestly. That's just what I'm seeing. I don't know. Let me know down in the comments what you think about that. Is it possible to completely eliminate 100% of the dust? I don't think so. I watch a channel called Motor Oil Geek, and dude, I geek out on that stuff, guys. I love comparisons. And he's been talking about air filtration and oil filtration and the relationship between efficiency versus performance. And the reality is if you want the most air in or the most oil flow, you're going to hurt the filtration abilities. And he actually also has talked, if I remember correctly, that when you have a brand new filter, whether it be oil or air, that it actually has reduced filtration capabilities over a slightly loaded filter. That's going to be for the comment section to talk about. What are your thoughts? But it seems to make sense, right? Like, it seems like you're adding to the medium if you add little specks of dust onto the outside. With that being said, you can't have 100% filtering efficiency and not have really good airflow. So anyway, I hope I'm able to communicate that properly. Again, this is with unknown amounts of tanks. This is actually a perfect time to talk about something that I wish Husqvarna would do, and this also includes steel. I wish that they would let the common person like myself or other curious-minded people, I wish that they would let us have access to their software. That software is very limited in what you can do. Guys, there's a big misconception that these computerized saws, like, people think everything's magic. All they do is give you data and information. I would love to be able to see things like how many times this saw has pulled over, how many times, like what the maximum RPM has been, the amount of hours on it, and all of that. It would just be really cool information. I'm a metrics guy, guys. I've wanted to have an Apple Watch, and when I was exercising a lot, you can tell I'm not doing that a lot right now. But anyway, when I used to exercise a lot, I tracked everything, man. Heart rate, miles, 10,000 miles a year on a bicycle, all of that. I want the same thing for my chainsaws because I just want to know. I have no clue how much time I actually have on this saw, and I don't want to go to a dealer and ask them, hey, how much does this cost? I don't want them to tell me $50 and then me to walk, because it's like, that's dumb. I just don't want to do that. I would be willing to pay for the interface. Be even better if it was like USB-C or something, but I'd be willing to pay for the interface to be able to do that myself. You can't tune, you can't change anything. I mean, even if they wanted to make it that you couldn't even update your own firmware, I'd be okay with that, because frankly, I don't care that much about it. If the saw operates, it's good. You're not changing any values in there. I don't even know if that's a thing, but if it was, just limit that to only dealerships, so that way you don't have people playing with stuff, selling saws that blow up on the next user because they had it tuned stupid. Anyway, that's my 2 bits. Again, it'd be super cool to be able to plug this saw in, see how much time it has on it, how much time I put on it, right? Like, so I could have plugged this in initially. In this circumstance, it wouldn't have worked because, again, I was kind of in a rush. But we could have plugged it in, said, okay, this saw has 2.3 hours on it. Now it has 13.75 hours on it. I didn't put 10 hours on this saw. You can't run a saw. I did not run a saw 10 hours straight. It turned on and off all day long. Guys, one of the best videos I saw on this saw was the greasy shop rag. Let's talk about that real quick. A lot of people really don't like saws like this, and they do like saws like this because there's no, computerization here, and there's a high and low jet that you can adjust yourself. I'm going to share my opinion about this. This should be really quick, But I don't care about that. I frankly just want to run the saw. This thing does a better job than I do at tuning. I get reamed down in the comment section because I don't do it exactly right with a tachometer. Conditions change, things change. You can always do better with manual tuning. Again, this does better than I do. I love running these two saws for that reason. One of the things that I consistently hear on my 500i videos, especially on Facebook, is people are like, yeah, and these are from steel fans. They'll say, wait until you have to repair it. We know the steel tax is heavy, and we know that the 500i steel tax is even heavier. I saw another video with Married with Small Engines. They're up in Canada, so this is going to be a little different. But she was working on one of these, and she gave some prices on like the fuel injector on that thing. Like, you could buy, if I recall correctly, you can practically buy one of these for that one component. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. That's so dumb. Now, Greasy Shop Rag, we'll get back to that. He had a video where Chris in the Woodyard and Santa Saws was up there at a dealership, and he kind of took a look, and he was sharing his perspective from a mechanic's perspective. He's not an operator, he's a mechanic, and he's a really good one at that. If you haven't seen his channel, check it out. But one of the things I appreciated, because I once was super thrifty, that's how I ended up with this saw here, and I ultimately got this because I wanted a little bit more performance, and I was just curious to see how they compared. But I was really concerned about reliability and cost at the time. So when, I believe his name is Scott at the Greasy Shop Rag, was talking about this, he said he checked like the components, the coil. They don't call it a coil, but you'll notice that the wire goes off to this side here, and it's over here. It's not on the flywheel side anymore. That's a really interesting choice. I'm really curious to see how all this works out in the long run. But when he was going over this saw, he talked about how like all the components were really close in price to the components in this. And again, if I'm misspeaking, I apologize to you guys, but I seem to remember that, and it feels as if I was really excited because that's cool. I didn't know if there was going to be, some super expensive component in here, but getting back to the computerization and the simplicity of a saw, this is my 2 bits. I believe that this saw and this saw are actually mechanically more simple than even this saw right here. In my opinion, this is good and reliable. The carburation is good and reliable here, but you're adding one more layer on top of already a complex thing, which is the carburation. The complexity here is the computer programming, but guys, the computer doesn't generally mess up all that much. From my perspective, think about our automobiles. They are absolutely incredible. Guys, I have not had major computerization issues in all of my vehicles from every brand. They are very reliable. What generally fails is mechanical things. There's not a lot mechanical going on right in here, far less here than here. That's a win. I think fuel injection is going to be the future, and I cannot wait to see what they do across the board. I really hope that they're able to take a 592 XP, shrink it down, make it lighter, and put fuel injection on it. Like for me, I wouldn't buy the 585. There's zero chance I would buy a 585. Now, one more thing, and then we'll leave this alone. You'll say like, well, I want to be able to tweak my carb. Guys, well-running saws, you shouldn't need to be tweaking on the carb. Yeah, you can eke out, 5% difference or whatever, but a sharper chain is going to give you better results than leaning it out or fattening up a little bit because the weather changed by 20 degrees. I'm not interested in that. I'm not that much of a nerd. I'm not going to sit there, especially like this. It takes so long for it to warm up. I am not going to tune it every time I run it. It's not happening. And again, if you are having to tune your saw just for it to run, the problem isn't the weather, it's that there's something wrong. Like I said, a well-running saw you shouldn't have to mess around with. This saw right here, I never have to touch the jets on it. It always runs right, and that's the way it ought to be. Now, these saws right here, they are more complex technically, but guys, I like less moving parts. So no solenoids on the carb is a win for me. And I will say this one more thing, and I know Husqvarna is going to see this video. In my opinion, I love Husqvarna saws, but I think Stihl's done one thing better than Husqvarna has done on their Auto-Tune and M-Tronic variants. I love that you can replace that solenoid on the Stihl setup, and they've made it a very affordable, like serviceable item. That's really cool. The solenoid is part of the carb. So if that were to fail, what happens is you end up with a whole entire new carb. I don't like that. I don't know if there's any parts married to one another here. I don't know if like the fuel pump and the injector and this are married. Like, can you just buy a new one and put it in? I don't know. This is probably going to make a few people chuckle and call me dumb, but I have a favorite feature on this saw. The starting was good. The saw was the smoothest saw I ever ran. The cutting was fantastic, but this is going to seem dumb, but I like the Husqvarna fuel and oil caps. This is one more thing that I love. And I talked about it in the videos, and you'll see. And I really encourage you, go check those cutting videos out. The most ingenious thing, besides the fuel injection and the power of this saw, is this right here. I've heard people talk about this is an improvement, you know, because you can do this with like a glove more easily. It's nice and protected here. When you compare it to this, I don't like it being in this hole in here. I mean, it's not a big deal. It was never really a problem until this came out and I found out that this was better. The improvement is right here, and I don't know if you see it compared to that. You see that clear spot so you can see your fuel? This works when the saw is sitting up and down this way, but it doesn't work when the saw is laid down on its side like this. I can see where my fuel is now. Okay, so you can see that. Check that out. I got that much fuel in there. When the saw is this way, I don't know about you guys, but I overfill my stuff all the time. When you fill this up, you can watch the fuel rise this way. I've never seen that on a Husqvarna saw. Completely clear tanks, it works kind of similar, but you have this broad, flat path. It's a really quick fill from here to here instantly. This is really nice and progressive. You can watch your fuel come up and get the perfect amount in there every single time. Now, of course, it doesn't work like that on the oil side. It's the same old thing. So I'm no doubt going to be putting too much oil in it when I get my own. I'm so bummed that I have to ship this back. All right, we got a stainless muffler here. It does have the screen in there still. And if it were mine, I would keep the screen in there. It runs perfectly. I don't see a reason to necessarily make changes on this. Let's go ahead and throw this back on. Like I said, I don't know who cut with this before other than Heath and Rachel. Gotta take my bar and chain off anyway, because like I said, it's going back. The tolerance in here feels tight. Like the sleeve that this fits into seems like it's pretty darn tight. Like I might actually, you know, once oil bar oil gets in here, probably be a smoother opening. It's like the tolerance is just a little tight. Gotta make sure you do that, guys. Outboard clutch, guys, I don't mind those. They're totally fine. Truly, the only negative to them is if you get your saw jammed up in a big buck with the power head against the wood and you want to remove your saw out of that wood from, you know, and just throw on another bar, you can't get the chain off with the power head there because you can't get the tension off enough to get this over the clutch. That's really the only negative. What a beefy side cover. This thing is really nice. It is it's another beautiful part, guys. Husqvarna does such a good job on these. I mean, these saws are incredible. We're gonna go back to that steel tax. I was watching a channel, Okie Mountain Outdoors, where he had a failure on his bearing inside the clutch, and he went to the steel dealership and bought a real steel bearing. Mind you, his saw doesn't seem like it has that much time on it. The bearing failed, which, whatever, that's fine. He went to the steel dealership. How much do you think that thing cost him? I would have guessed like $10. It was $20. $20. The steel tax is a real deal. I don't know what Husqvarna does, but at the same time, like, that just seems excessive. One of the cool things about Husky stuff is you can buy OEM parts with MSRPs for a really good price. Like, a full wrap bar and like the large capacity clutch cover for something like a 372, or I think like the 572, they're super cheap. Like all of that is like less than half of just the full wrap on this Echo here. I can't imagine. I bet you that the 500i, I bet you like the side cover costs more. Like, this really flimsy part on the 500i, I bet you it costs more than like a full wrap handle for a 572. It's just mind-blowing to me. I don't know. That's just something I was thinking about. I never actually checked to see where the oiler was on this. I just ran it. Like I said, I was in a hurry. It didn't seem like it was like throwing out oil like crazy, but my chains didn't look too dry. This chain's going to be ready to sharpen. You can see it's not like all burned up and everything. Oak has a tendency to like leave a lot of stuff on it. And keep this in mind, guys. This was a semi-chisel chain in dirty wood with a little bit of a safety raker, and the saw was a pleasure to use. So in really nice, clean felling type circumstances, with a square ground chain like Full Tilt sent me, oh my gosh, I cannot imagine what this saw would be like. This is going to be a long video. There's guys that have done better, teardowns. I think Machinery Nation took one of these apart. Just a gorgeous, gorgeous machine. Love it. Love it, love it, love it. Simple cable. I love the no choke procedure because it's fuel injected, and I do like this over my 500i button you push. The button is better than Steel's normal procedure, but this has continuity between my other saws. Continuity is a great thing when you're switching between models, and that feels very familiar to me. Really nice work. So now we enter into my final thoughts, where I'm going to talk about whether or not this is a 60cc saw in a 50cc body that runs like a 70cc saw. I'm going to preface this by sharing my opinion, but I feel like most modern 50cc saws have grown in size. They're like a little bit too bloated to me for what a 50cc saw used to be. Just think back to like a Steel 026. I don't have a lot of experience with a lot of other models, but that Steel 026, the first time I picked one up at my friend's house, Dustin, at Faithful Farm Adventures, I couldn't believe how small it was. It was so compact. The 550 XP is a wonderful saw to run, but when you set that beside that, it looks enormous. So this 564, literally, like, I could easily mistake this saw. This is the 564 and this is the 50cc saw. I could mistake them very easily for one another. There is a 372 for comparison. Okay, so this is much closer in size to that than it is to that. This isn't in my script or my talking points, but this saw almost has no purpose now with this. I mean, it is heavier, but it's just as compact. It's really nice to use. I don't really love 20-inch bars very often. There are circumstances for them, like in hardwoods where you're working here. I like them for that, but otherwise 24-inch bars, sometimes 28, are the sweet spot for me at my height, at like 5'7", or I don't know, sometimes I say I'm 5'9". I really don't even know, but it's somewhere right in there. It probably depends on what boots I'm wearing. So in comparison to like a 50cc saw, yes, it's very, very similar in size, but where it's different is the density of the weight. The 564 feels substantial, and I'm not saying it feels heavy. You can just tell there is a lot of stuff packed into there, and it's extremely, really, it's just dense. The quality is insane. Everything feels solid. I've always described running saws like a 661 or my 500i or even a 261. They feel great, but they feel like a piñata. They do not feel dense. That does sometimes make them lighter weight for the same CC class, but they just don't feel as nice. Sometimes It's nice to have additional weight and heft as counterbalance so you can run a longer bar. The 5 Series Huskies all have that similar feeling, and they're just wonderful to run. So talking about that counterbalance, if you have your mind set on running a bar greater than 24 inches, then I think that the 564 wouldn't be the option for me. If I only had to run, because there's those people out there that only run a 32-inch bar, I think the saw is too light and too compact for it. Unless you can find a super, super light 32-inch bar, which I know they exist. And also, depending upon your scenario, I like a saw that can pivot nicely off of that front handle. I don't want to be fighting the tip to move it. Now, I know there's technique involved there, but it's just the way I like it. My 562 XP was originally ordered with a 28-inch bar, and while it was really nice to be able to stand up and buck, it was just a weird, awkward feeling saw because the power head just didn't counterbalance it very well. I like it on something more like a 372 class saw. Does the 564 XP have the power of a 70cc saw? It just depends on what model and what era you're talking about. I think it has enough power to live in the realm of many 70cc saws, including some that you can purchase today. There's going to be lots of tests coming out in the future, kind of testing this claim, but I think that the 572 XP would outrun it. I think it's going to have more power, but I think personally for operator fatigue, this is going to be a winner. The fact that I have different types of trees here between pine and oak, I'm doing different kinds of work, and so I don't necessarily want a low slung saw with a 32-inch bar. That's too long for me anyway, I'm too short. But like a 28-inch bar all the time, it's just not comfortable. For my application, in my opinion, I think that this saw could easily replace or make me not buy a 70cc class saw if I were being completely practical. So what this 564 XP has done for me is it's made the 70cc class saws less appealing. Because I'm a chainsaw addict, if I had a 564 XP, would I still want a 572? The answer is probably yes. But the practical side of me, if I had the 564 XP, would I be interested in a 572? The answer is probably not. The practical side of me would say that the 564 will do everything that my 550 does and will do everything that my 500i does for the most part, because again, I don't have necessarily large wood all the time, but that saw is just really, I think it has just a really broad range of work it can do given the size, the feel, the power, the price, all of that. I think that if you got into much bigger wood, if you were needing like 32-inch bars, like I run on my 500i and my ported 7310, I don't think I would buy a 70cc saw for that. If I'm using the full bar length, especially in hardwood, I think 564 and 592 would be an incredible pairing. So talking about that, if you're bucking 24 inches and greater all the time, I'm talking about a lot of firewood processing. I think that you could warrant a larger saw. But if you just have a mix of stuff where you sometimes have 28-inch wood, most of the time 12-inch wood, the 564 is going to be perfect. That's why 60cc saws have become so popular. The 562 XP runs really, really well, but this just has a more usable power band to me. Please understand that there's going to be those of you in the comment section that have run a 20-inch bar on a 70cc saw for 30 years, and I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm just sharing my opinions, so please feel free to share yours down below. Should you be excited if you've pre-ordered one of these saws? The answer is yes. I think that you should be excited. I think that Husqvarna has done their homework on this saw. That's why it has taken so long for it to come out. I think that they've done a really good job designing it. I hope that they learned from experience on the 562 Mark I. Guys, I have a lot of content about that saw. That saw, I love it. It's the most loved saw I've ever owned because I've said with like Chris in the Woodyard, I told him that if I only had one saw, it'd be the 562. And I was talking about like the format. I love it. It's just really good. But I did have problems with it early on. You're going to be happy with this 564 XP as long as you didn't have unreasonable expectations. Unreasonable expectations would be like this thing is going to outperform a 500i or a 592, or it's just going to be magical. Guys, it's pretty darn close to being magical. Now, do I want one? The answer is yes. I absolutely want one. But just like you, I don't have a clue when I'm going to get it. To answer the first question I asked at the very beginning of this video, did Husqvarna beat the law of diminishing returns over the 562 with the 564? I think that they did a darn good job, and I'd be willing to say that yes, I think they made a meaningful upgrade over the 562. That's just my 2 bits with my experience thus far. Thank you for watching the Okie Woodsman channel, and make sure you check out sawsuppliers.com for the best deals on outdoor power equipment using my code OAKIE10, OAKIE10. Also, if you're interested in the shop builds that we have coming, I'm building a shop and a pretty large garage, separate structures. We got a lot going on. If you're interested in that, I'd love for you to subscribe, and we'll see you on the next one.